Okay. We are already on week 7. It's flying. Summer is here almost. So we are into sleep and recovery. So hopefully you've all been super active and eating better. And now we're going to focus on, like we did last week, rest and relaxation and sleep, and why that's also important to our health and our weight. So the necessity of sleep. Sleep's basically the nutrition for your brain. So we need it. But more than ever, we are more tired than we've ever been in America. Sleep deprivation is a relatively new health issue in America, and even across the world. Prior to electricity, most individuals slept about 10 hours a night, and that's because they relied on the sunlight. And there wasn't a lot of that in certain times of the month, and so their clocks were set with when the sun was up and down. So sometimes that meant more sleep. Over the past, I would say, now this is an old statistic, so probably the last 30 years or so, we've increased our time traveling to and from work by about 158 hours. So if you add that all together, that's about a month's worth of travel that many of us spend in our commute. You can raise your hand, but do any of you guys commute to work? Because I do. And it takes up a considerable chunk of our time, not to mention all the extra time we spend at work and the other things we have on our plates. So the thing that gets cut into it is sleep. And in America, unfortunately, we are go-getters and we work more than most industrialized nations. I know we used to have a couple companies that said they had some satellites overseas, and their staff had different work hours than the Americans, and quite considerably less, but sometimes more productive as far as sales and outcomes for their business and stuff. So just because we work longer doesn't mean we're necessarily always working better. Sometimes it's the case, but not always. So I guess show this presentation to your boss to lobby for shortened work days. So let's get into sleep. We'll talk about the sleep cycles first so you can understand why it's important to get so much sleep in the night. Typically, we need at least 8 hours, about 7 to 9 hours in a day to get consistent sleep. Anything less than that within a 24-hour period is considered sleep deprivation as far as the brain's concerned. Sleep basically is the fuel for your brain. It helps reset everything. It helps during the repair and growth processes of our body. It also resets our mind, helps us with creativity, thinking. It's important for memory. So lots of good things happen when we put our brain to rest for sleep. There's 4 different stages of the sleep cycle. So you can see over here all 4 stages listed. The first stage happens right when you're going to bed. So it's your lightest sleep stage. You can be easily awoke. You're just starting to drift off to bed. Then you go into light sleep for a consistent amount of time, but then you get into deep sleep. And when you first go to bed, those first few hours of sleep, you spend most of your cycles in that deep sleep. And then as we get through to the morning hours, that sleep cycle transitions to more time spent in our REM cycle, which is what most of us think of as that dreaming period. That's why we remember our dreams that happen most vividly at the end of the sleep cycle and not the ones we had at like 10 p.m. The reason our deep sleep is happening in larger chunks at the first half of the night is because that's when our body growth and repair is happening. And then at the tail end of the night, it switches over to REM. And those are the systems that the brain does to help with creativity and thinking and memory. And so we need to go through all of the cycles. So if we wake up throughout the night, that's not helpful to the body because we can't get through all of these cycles. And science has shown that it's best to get at least 5, if not 6 cycles of sleep in each night. So that's going through all 4 cycles 5 or 6 times before you're waking up. And sometimes that's just not in the cards for some of us. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But continuous sleep is best to get that brain rejuvenated for the next day. Sometimes when we're young, we think we can bank our sleep and just sleep all weekend and then we'll be ready to go for the weekend. But science also proves otherwise. Think of it sort of like a debt where you have to repay it. Sleep does not dissipate. With sleep debt or not sleeping does not dissipate. So just because you had a short night's sleep several days in a row doesn't mean that your body will eventually get over it and you can accommodate those short sleeps health wise anyways. You might be able to power through, but it might not necessarily be good on your health. So sleep debt is cumulative. You'll keep building it up. So even just missing like 1 hour sleep a night. So say you went from 7 hours of sleep to 6 hours for a whole week straight. If you add up those 7 hours, that's almost a full night's worth of sleep that you have missed. So it's essentially like staying up for a 24-hour period at one point in that week. So it can be very detrimental to our health. And like I said, you can't make up all that sleep on a weekend or in one day, because it has to be consistent day after day and prolonged periods of sleep. Your sleep should also be focused on your circadian rhythm. Most of you have probably heard about that, but that's sort of the internal mechanisms that trigger when we're most awake and when we're most drowsy. They are aligned with basically daylight and nighttime. So it's hard. Most people have disrupted circadian rhythms if they're shift workers who work the night shifts. If they don't have like their bedroom's dark or, different things in place to make and rewire their brain to think it is daylight versus nighttime and vice versa. When your circadian rhythm is working well, it will stimulate you during peak rhythms. And for us, typical people, it's between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. when we're at our highest peaks and 6 to 8 p.m. So around the lunch hour, which most of us probably can tell. And then again, right after, a lot of times people say they have that last minute urge before they get ready for bed. And again, that's another time when we have peak energy. Our slower times are from 3 to 6 a.m., which is the early morning hours. And then again from 1 to 4, which many of us probably can admit to having that afternoon lull a little bit as well. And that's just natural to the circadian rhythm. When it comes to sleep, adults, like I already said, is recommended to have 7 to 9 hours a night. Another show of hands, how many people are at least getting 7 hours to 9 hours of sleep every night consistently? Anybody willing to brave? Oh, we got a few. 3, 4, 5, 6. Good, good. Well, hopefully you are this week because that's the challenge, I think, is to get at least 7 hours of sleep every night. But it's super important. So again, that quality of sleep is really important. Prolonged sleep. Lots of things can disrupt us in the night. Potty breaks, noises, kids, pets, even using technology and stuff can make us restless in the night. Medical problems, some people have insomnia, all those kinds of things can lead to inefficient sleep. And our sleep patterns and cycles change as we age. So if you think about a newborn baby, they literally sleep basically their whole first few months, right? But they have very active stages. So most of their sleep is spent in that REM stage, remember, where we're dreaming and the brain's super active. And of course, there's a lot of brain development still happening in that infant. As we get older, we start to have a little bit more consistent patterns like adults. Sometimes we still need to build in those naps and such. As children, we tend to have deeper sleeps, and that's for that growth period, right? Children are growing at pretty rapid speeds, and that's why during their sleep cycles, their brains are spending most of the time in the growth cycles. Adolescence, the shift in sleep changes a little bit. And if you remember back when you were teenagers, you liked to stay up late and you liked to wake up really late. And then as adults, the importance shifts to quality because we need that prolonged sufficient sleep to reset the brain. But that can be more difficult because of all the disruptions I mentioned. So here are a few complications, or I should say health issues that can go along with lack of sleep. Daytime drowsiness, mood shifts. There's lots of linkages between stress and anxiety and brain hormones, chemicals not working at their peak. Lack of interest in socializing. Immunity is a huge one. It puts a lot of stress on the body, which we'll talk about, and can really depress your immunity. So you might be someone who gets sick more often, has a harder time recovering from colds and things, and that can be attributed to lack of sleep. Always being chilled. That's just an energy thing where the body is not having enough energy to get all the processes completed, which again creates heat in the body. So if you're not sleeping enough, your body's kind of out of energy to get those systems going. Reduced productivity, fatigue, lethargic, slower reaction times. I've got a slide on that here next, I think. Maybe taking quick naps and not really planning on it, or sleep seizures. And then we'll also are going to talk about weight gain and how sleep can have a huge impact on our health and weight and hormones. But back to the performance and the fatigue. They've done several studies on how lack of sleep is comparable to being impaired by alcohol, and the effects being very similar. So some studies have shown that if you go 18 hours without sleeping, so think about someone maybe who works in healthcare or law enforcement or something where they have big work shifts, 18 hours without sleep can produce a similar impairment as someone with a blood alcohol content of 0.05. And if you remember, 0.08 is the limit. You can start feeling impaired at about 0.04. So this person would show some slow reaction times, things like that, with 18 hours of sleep. If you go a full day, 24 hours of without sleep, you would have similar impairment as someone with a blood alcohol point of 1.0. So again, over the legal limit, probably shouldn't be driving if they have gone 24 hours without sleeping. People with mild untreated sleep apnea, so those are consistently poor nights of sleep, night after night after night, also show an impairment in reaction time and performance and stuff similar to that a person with a 0.06 blood alcohol content. And another study showed that on just 4 hours of sleep, one beer can have the same impact as a 6-pack on a full night's sleep. So again, you've all probably noticed this at some point in your life where you're so tired and you get behind the wheel of a car and try to drive somewhere, and it's so difficult and dangerous. So be cognizant of that if you're someone who has long shifts or not very good at getting a good night's rest, that if you need to ask for a ride, call for a ride, or figure something else out, it'd be important to do so. All right, a lot of people don't think of sleep as the first thing to think about when it comes to weight loss, but I would say it should be maybe the first thing you concentrate before you try to change your diet or fitness, is to make sure you're getting enough sleep. Because even if you change your exercise habits and you change your nutrition, if you're still drowning yourself with not getting enough sleep, your efforts are going to be pretty futile. So, why is a lack of sleep inhibiting weight loss or being able to manage your weight? Has to go back with those hormones that we talked about in the last session. So if you remember, adrenaline was one that we talked about. It's that it triggers your appetite, and so that goes up the less sleep we have. So you're continually to get more hungry both at night and throughout the day, and that's because you're not sleeping enough and it's spiking that hormone. Oppositely, it decreases leptin, which, if you remember last time, that's kind of that satiety hormone. So it makes us feel full. And so that's going down if we don't sleep enough. So both of those together are just not good news when it comes to weight management. Lack of sleep also reduces energy. Most of the time, this is somewhat tied to people not just being active enough to wear their body out where they can get a good night's sleep. If any of you just started exercising recently with this challenge, hopefully you're experiencing better night's sleep because you have put your body through some paces and it wants to take time to rest and restore. It also has to do to the fact this lack of energy also can raise cortisol. And that's because the body, when you're sleeping, still needs to go through all those processes of repair and growth. And so it's going to trigger the body that it needs energy to get that stuff done. And in order to get energy into your bloodstream, it releases cortisol to release that energy, that fat into the bloodstream for energy. And then that triggers insulin, which we know then triggers fat storage. So it's back to that vicious cycle of insulin and cortisol that we talked about last month too, where that those stressors at night, by not getting enough sleep, continue to add to fat storage and troubles with weight management. And our insulin kind of gets out of whack, just like we talked about too. So it's again a vicious cycle. And so I guess the main point here is, if you're someone who thinks you're doing all the things right, make sure you're also getting enough sleep, because that could be the main factor of any of the issues you're dealing with, because we don't necessarily think of sleep, but it's one of the main influences on our health. All right, so what are some sleep strategies? One, make sure sleep is of value to you. Prioritize it. Be consistent. That's also very important to get that circadian rhythm really set. When people are at their optimum, they can go to bed and wake up without an alarm every day because of their circadian rhythm being so on point. So maybe you can get to that point. Is anyone to that point yet? Sometimes my son is. He is absolutely, he puts himself to bed at 9 o'clock every night. And then he is absolutely up at 6:55 every day, no matter what, whether it's dark in the room, light in the room, or whatever. It's unreal. Even on weekends, though. Pay back your sleep quickly. Create a supportive sleeping environment. So, that's making sure the room's dark at night, making sure your bedroom is your bedroom and it's not also your office and not also your kitchen and dining table and stuff like that. Like, convince your mind that that's a place where you go and rest and sleep. Avoid negative mental stimulation before bed. You've all heard this kind of stuff too. Turn off the television, turn off your phones, go back to reading old-fashioned books and get off your Kindles if sleep is an issue for you, because that stimulation can just make it difficult on your body. Obviously, avoiding any kind of stimulants or alcohols, caffeine, nicotine. Some people have benefits with aromatherapy or, other meditations or calming things before bed, a bath or a shower or whatever it might be. And then, like I just mentioned earlier, wear yourself out during the day, put in a good hard workout, get in the garden, do some yard work, clean up the house, whatever, a lot of us like to lounge around when we get home at the end of the day. And for many of us, we sit at our desk all day long, so we're already lounging, but it's a different type of lounging for our brain. But if we can get out and be more active in those hours outside of the office, it's helpful for a better night's sleep. So I'm going to finish up just on a little outside of sleep, but on recovery. So we talked about during the exercise one, how important it is for you to stretch and to recover and have rest days built in. And that all goes on to the same premise as sleep. If we're not allowing our body that time for recovery, you just continually wear on it. And that's adds stress. Stress is cortisol to the body. Cortisol is fat storage. It leads to insulin sensitivities not being good and diabetes. And, it's just a domino effect. Most of us, on average, hopefully, are getting about 30 to maybe 60 minutes of exercise or physical activity a day. So that still leaves a lot of time for the body to recover, which is good. It's important because it helps the body, like I said, rejuvenate, repair. If you're someone who's exercising, particularly strength training, you're breaking down those muscles during the session. So that, again, like I said, strength training, the rest days are when you're seeing the gains happen and when those muscles can recover. So make sure you build in those rest and recovery days, and that stretching is also helpful. Lactic acid builds up when you work out. That can cause a lot of soreness in people. So stretching and rest is also important to get that lactic acid out of the body and mitigate it from pooling in certain areas of the body. So very important to include rest days as well, not just count sleep. So, okay, that was a quick one, but that's all right. You can take a 10-minute cat nap before you have to go back to your office. So just some key takeaways. Remember, we want prolonged sleep and we want it to be quality sleep. So we don't want interruptions throughout the night. Try to wear ourselves out so physical activity can be helpful. And think of supportive coping mechanisms when you're stressed, because we want to keep that cortisol low if we can. And so, do calming exercises or whatever it needs to be to make sure that you can get a restful sleep. So any questions before we jump off? Looks like some of you have good circadian rhythms by raising your hands, so that's awesome. I'm not there yet. I think my body doesn't want to wake up till about 7:25, so we need to start our day later at work, but other people have earlier time clocks, so that's all right. Next week, we're going to focus on, I should go back and look. I think it's on supportive work environments, so things we can do inside of our office spaces to make our habits easier to do, make the healthy choice the easier choice. So we'll talk about that, and I'll probably be asking you for ideas during the session. So be starting to think about what you guys have in place at your workplaces that make it easy to be healthy, and we'll share those. So, all right, thank you all.